Howdy, 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 screenagers. It is time for another episode of the Canon, your favorite movie podcast. As always, the one and only movie podcast providing you with a watch list of the most essential movies ever made. We have got an interesting one today. I'm not going to say that we have a great one. This is an episode that, we've sort of been looking at and wondering what to do about it. But it's kind of a movie that we have to talk about. So we're going to try to get through it. Today we're going to be talking 1915 DW Griffith's Birth of a Nation. Ugh. But joining me today, probably the only screenager who could, tackle this movie, the only Saw contributor who was up for the task, Mr. Jacob Holmes. Welcome back. How's it going?
I am glad to be here. Regardless of what we're talking about, it's always a treat to be on the Canon. This is an interesting one to tackle. Not only is it subject matter wise difficult to talk about, also normally under normal circumstances, um, silent movies are just not my bag. So there's a
Mm.
lot of things about this movie that are a bit difficult for me to watch, especially at 3.5 hours long. But here I am, ready to talk about it.
It's funny that you say all that because when we were, going through the schedule for the movies for this season of the Canon, you the first thing that you said to me was, "Oh my God, Birth of a Nation! That's my favorite movie ever. I can't wait to talk about it."
Oh, I forgot I said that. Wow, that's crazy. Uh, it is. Well, it's very formative, despite the fact that Uh, no, I've watched this movie one time in a history class,
Hmm.
partly, and then I watched it again for this podcast. So um, that is the extent of my knowledge of Birth of a Nation, and both times, um, really like pulling teeth. And we'll
Yeah.
talk about some of the because the reason that this movie is essential um, is something that I don't like. I respect, and I don't really, but personally, I don't care about it. I can't make myself enjoy that aspect of why it's essential regardless, and it has nothing to do with the subject. Like, well, the subject matter
Hmm.
is its own thing, but even the first half of this movie, which is comparatively tame, um, it's a slog. It's a slog for me.
We'll definitely talk about all of that, the content of the film, the quote unquote artistic merit of the film. I think we'll talk about what you touched on with like how it is that people watch this movie or where people are typically first exposed to this movie, you watching it in a history class, and how it sort of pops up in that regard. But before we jump in, I do think it will be kind of interesting. Oftentimes on the Canon, guests are either some combination of uh, you know wasteland contributors, Saw contributors, folks who write for the website, or we'll bring in some folks who have their own shows or work in and around movies in other ways. So I think for this movie, I'm gonna kind of treat you as the latter kind of guest, like someone who is hopping on the show from another show, because you have a side project that does seem kind of related to, this movie. But what? Why don't you tell us a little bit about movies in black and white? Your other pod that you do.
Well, I do this podcast sometimes. We've done one season of it. It's called Movies in Black and White. I do it with this guy, Raph Stitt. Um,
Oh
so,
shit.
oh yeah, this is like a weird crossover episode. This is not Movies in Black and White. It is a Wasteland product, the Canon. But yeah, if you enjoy our discussion that we have today, you're definitely going to want to jump over and check out Movies in Black and White because we go straight into the thorns in that show. There's really no limitations. Right into the briar patch, if you will, to do a Song of the South reference, which we haven't talked about on the show yet. That'll be fun. But no, we've got a good season worth of content out there, and we are Obviously, Raph and I are very busy bees between Pole Position podcast and the Canon, and we're doing Wasteland After Dark a little bit, and writing for Screen Age Wasteland. So we got a lot going on. Um, but we are going to film at some point season 2 of Movies in Black and White, and yeah, we're just discussing race and film in a variety of different ways. So, like, I mean, we had an episode where we talked about how movies depict interracial couples and like the history of interracial, especially interracial marriages, which is even less common in movies than just a couple. And trying to figure out how that relates to society, and and then we did we did, obviously we did race swaps because everyone's always talking about race swapping characters,
Mhm.
when it's appropriate, when it's not appropriate, or the conversations around that. So lots of good stuff to dig into. I think next season, one of the ones I'm most excited to talk about is the like portrayals of MLK and Malcolm X in movies, and especially like um, we're going to dig into how like X Men pulls from MLK and Malcolm X, and how those two have been uh, pitted against each other in a certain way, and like given two sides of the philosophical coin in movies. And so, um, yeah, I'm excited to get back to it.
For sure. It's good stuff. I you know, might be surprising. I'm a fan of that show. I like what's going on over there. It's good stuff. I like to listen to it. I think folks should listen to it. The conversation that we're gonna have here about Birth of a Nation will be very different from any potential conversation that would be had on Movies in Black and White about the Birth of a Nation, although there will be some overlap, especially because both shows feature the two of us. So, but yeah, we're going to be discussing here, we're going to be tackling the interesting question of why it is that The Birth of a Nation is a movie that kind of needs to be in the canon, and how it is that you approach a movie like this being something that we call and label as essential. But we're here to do it. We're here to tackle it. Again, it's Jacob's favorite movie. We'll probably have to repeat that a few times throughout the course of the episode just to remind folks that
Well,
uh,
and
that,
for
that's what we're
and to
looking at
be
here.
fair, I live in Montgomery, Alabama area, so when the stuff that's depicted in the South, especially in the second half of the movie, is just how I was raised. So
uh, what a wild movie. Should we jump in? Should we dive in?
yeah, yeah, let's go.
Let's do it. Okay, so for you, you said that the first time that you watched this movie was in a history class. I'm assuming in high school or maybe in college.
College, yeah, no, they don't teach this movie in Alabama history classes. Uh, no, in college history though, I guess it must have been in American history to
Hmm.
1877. I think was the course. And I don't know that. I mean, I don't even know that we really watched. We didn't watch it. We didn't watch the full thing, but we watched a lot of clips from it. We discussed the film,
Hmm.
and how its influence on things and such. Um, but yeah, no, we didn't watch the full thing, but I was definitely treated to several clips, especially from the second half of the film, and kind of you know I was talking about how supposedly Woodrow Wilson said this was like history written with lightning, and then how it was a tool at the time that um, I wasn't actually taught at the time, which is interesting. The professor you'd think would have mentioned this, but apparently this movie was considered racist at its time,
Hmm.
which is kind of an interesting aspect because um, we have a lot of movies from this kind of time period where we look back at them and go, ugh, and then like maybe companies are putting a disclaimer in front of them. But this movie apparently, yeah, I mean, and in fact, I haven't seen Intolerance from DW Griffith. That's also in the
Hmm.
canon, but apparently, supposedly, that had some to do with like the backlash to birth. of a nation. So I mean, you're talking about there was real time backlash to this movie.
Yeah. It I mean, the movie well, for those who don't know, but I think anyone who is, familiar with film history, like, even kind of generally and broadly is aware of this movie and, really what it's about. It's based on a book that is about the romantic history of the, formation of the Ku Klux Klan, um, and so this movie is basically, like, depicting a version that is like celebrating and embracing that story and history, in a number of different ways. So that's, kind of like the general idea of why this movie receives the backlash that it does. But like you said, Intolerance, his follow up movie to this, is also in the canon. We have an episode about that. Sailor and I spoke about that movie. But a lot of the intention of that movie is in response to the backlash that Griffith got from this film, which again, because of its like hard depictions of history and how things played out according to this filmmaker and the original screenwriter and the playwright who wrote the play based on the book that this movie is like also kind of based on. Yeah, people at the time, especially like many chapters of the NAACP, were trying to get this movie banned and like not shown. And DW Griffith was like, this is an infringement on First Amendment rights and, all of that stuff. Kind of a similar cycle that has played out time and time again. Like, where is the line between First Amendment rights and the like need for some kind of I don't know, like social responsibility to not make movies about how rad the KKK is. I don't know. So yeah, there was like real time backlash to this movie. Obviously, it didn't work. This movie is like still if you adjust for inflation, is one of the highest grossing movies of all time. Like this was a mega box office success. It is in many ways still considered like a critical success. Um, but the issue becomes how how much does the like horrid racist nature of this movie take away from those successes and those accomplishments and like what it means for how it is that we today in 2026 understand cinematic language. And like the unfortunate truth is this movie does inform a lot of ways that we today understand cinematic language, but like how much credit do we have to give to this film in particular for doing that? We'll also get into the question of like whether or not it's appropriate to like fully ignore something like this, or if we have to like face something like this kind of head on in order to properly grow as both a cinematic and like culture at large. So we're going to be tackling some heavy shit when it comes to this, and at the same time talk about a 3 hour silent movie, which is insane. People complain about like Killers of the Flower Moon being 3 hours, and that's a Marty Scorsese movie with Leonardo DiCaprio and Robert De Niro, shot in color, with synced up dialogue, and people still complain about that being too long. Like, if you're complaining about that, then I can't imagine the complaints that modern audiences would have just about like the length and pacing of something like this, which I think was your biggest issue with it, because you said otherwise everything else is like super cool that's happening.
Yeah, right. Yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, well, at least if you really think about it. I mean, obviously, it's released as one movie. I don't know if there's like an intermission at the time, but like, really, this is just two
Mhm.
movies. It's like a movie and its sequel, just like made and released together. Because there's two very distinct like movies in this thing,
Mhm.
but obviously they involve the same characters. So if this was released today, it would be absolutely exactly the same, but it would be released as two movies. Otherwise, it would be it's the same. Uh, no, but I mean, yeah, it is. It is well, and as a silent film, it's just so long. I mean, because you're not, half of that is waiting because you got to read the title card because you see them talking and then you read what it says. And yeah, I mean, getting into a little bit of like what this movie did, one of the reasons that it's essential um, is all the new techniques and the kind of revolutionary things that it did. And we're talking about like close ups. We're talking about like intercutting between like two things in one like scene, like a chase scene where you're intercutting. Obviously that's important, like that's an important technique that really puts you into the chase. And you know lots of things that were done. This was very expensive. The use of extras. There's some great things to be said too about the one thing I truly appreciate in this movie, legitimately, is you see like even today you see a lot of movies that are still shot in black and white, obviously, and then most movies are shot in color. But I don't really see a lot of. There's a lot of scenes in this movie that are monochromatic, where they're like basically black
Hmm.
and white, but they have like a red or blue or green filter, and that creates some interesting images. And so I think I don't see that a lot. I'd like to see a filmmaker today kind of play with that a little more. Um, not necessarily monochromatic the whole time, but like um, maybe a movie that's fully monochromatic, like every scene is monochromatic, like this one where it switches between colors depending on what's going on. I mean that was truly an artistic thing that I can actually still appreciate. The problem though with like
Hmm.
the close-ups and the stitch cutting and all that stuff, I respect it. I respect that this movie, that DW Griffith did these things. I don't know if DW Griffith was like a genius in that regard and came up with this idea, or how he innovated this idea. But from an appreciation level, I just can't. I can't be like watching the movie. I can't care because
Yeah.
it's a technique that is so far behind us now that I've seen it done way better and just way improved upon, and
Hmm.
we and in in live speech and sound. And so it's like in this silent film, I'm kind of like I just don't care. It's like when people talk about the old graphics, like for Pong or Centipede on Atari. Like it's like, yeah, that's great. I'm
Yeah.
I'm sure at the time when you grew up with a radio box and then this thing came on the screen, that was really cool and that's great for you. I can't care because I've played like NCAA 14 and stuff. Like not this is not
You have GTA 5. You don't
we
need
we've
Pong.
we've built
Yeah.
upon. I can't. It's like I mean I appreciate the cavemen in the cave who created fire, but I've seen way cooler things now than creating fire. So it's not really like I can't look at that with the eyes of amazement that the people at the time would have had. So I'm glad for those people who got to
Yeah.
see this new innovation, but looking back on it, I can only say, well, that's cool. That was the first time it was used, and then I move on. I have no further. I can't watch the movie and be going, wow, this is the first time this was ever used. Wow, it just doesn't hit me.
So the follow-up question for that is, because we're talking about the canon, we're talking about movies that are essential, and we're trying to understand the movies that you can't tell the history of cinema without, right? Like that's kind of what we're looking to do here, is like these are the movies that if you want to be a film fan, or this is your basic foundation of things that you should understand in order to build upon that and like grow your status or your interest and knowledge as a cinephile or film lover, or whatever terminology you want to use. So then when we look at something like this and it's like, okay, this is the one of, if not the first time that we're using things like close-ups, that we're cross-cutting, that we have these large scale scenes of battle and war with hundreds of extras, and everything is shot on this like wide screen with everything in focus and like in a line of sight that reads clearly and concisely or whatever. Do we have to look at this movie specifically when we're talking about the essential movies, or do we are we able to, because of how both old and um morally repugnant this movie is, do we then just look at things that influence this and are maybe a little bit closer to how it is that we understand and read movies today, and like mark those as the ones that are essential, or do we have to go all the way back to the beginning? You know?
I think this brings up an interesting thought about the canon that I've never really had until now, but I don't have a problem with Birth of a Nation being on our list of essential movies. But in that
Hmm.
same regard, I don't know that our just having it on the list of essential movies means these are all movies that you should watch. These are all movies maybe that you should know about. But this movie to me is like people say this meeting could have been an email. This movie's equivalent of that in the sense is like this movie could have been a Wikipedia article. I enjoyed reading the Wikipedia article for this movie more than I enjoyed watching the movie. You know what I'm saying? I mean, like I was more
Yeah.
interested in reading the Wikipedia about how these were new techniques and like explaining like this was like radical for the time, rather than watching
Hmm.
the actual movie. Um,
So like for you, for most movies that are in the canon, when you go and watch them and you understand, okay, this is a important moment in cinematic history because it does XYZ for the art form, or because it meant XYZ culturally, or because um it meant means it introduced us to this person or these ideas, or something like that. Do you do you often find yourself like having that disconnect where you're like, okay, this just could have been a Wikipedia article, and like I didn't necessarily need to watch this movie in order to understand that it's essential, and like have that be something that is in the back of my mind or within my bag or repertoire or whatever, when I am watching all of these other movies that I love and enjoy for whatever reason.
yeah, I don't mean it. You know, I would never think of the other movies in the canon as disdainfully as I'm treating the Birth of a Nation, probably.
Hmm.
But I mean, some of the older movies I don't connect with in the canon, which is fine, and I can appreciate them again for the same reasons, like appreciating Birth of a Nation. I will say most of them have more value watching than Birth of a Nation. And honestly, I'm very like silent films are very hard for me, like I said. So there's not a whole lot of silent films where I mean, I try more of the Charlie Chaplin stuff, but you know, there's not a whole lot of silent films that I can really get jazzed up about watching. I can appreciate them more. And
Hmm.
I do want to kind of actually claw back a little bit and say that there is worth in watching The Birth of a Nation. When I talk about the Wikipedia article being more exciting, that is definitely true. I'm not excited watching Birth of a Nation at all. Like I'm not having a good time.
Hmm.
However, watching it does imbue you like with more of the sense of what it was, and it can be essential in other ways, like culturally. Like I think, especially living in Montgomery, Alabama, living in the South today, without getting too deep into politics of any kind. I mean, there are a lot of things about the Birth of a Nation as a piece of media that resonate today with things that are happening today. Um, you know, one of the things that's interesting about this movie in its two halves is the first half of the movie is something that we've seen a lot of in a lot of, you know, films that are still talked about and questioned today. Song of the South, Gone with the Wind, this kind of romanticization of antebellum South.
Hmm.
But you know, the difference with Birth of a Nation is it tries to romanticize, um, or you know, I don't know if romanticize is quite the right word, but it goes past antebellum South towards romanticizing the KKK and kind of trying to create this alternate reality of like what Reconstruction was like. You know, I mean, incredibly racist stuff in the second half of this movie. And honestly, it's not that different than a lot of the racist stuff that you see today. And you're like, how are people even believing this crap? Like, it's not just, you know, simple racist stuff. They like say things that are specifically not true, that you know are not true,
Hmm.
and that no sane person would believe is true. And yet here they are spouting it, and you're like, it's got a lot of the same. It's got a lot of the same vibes.
Not to fully defend this movie, but I think part of what makes this such a weird thing to look at is that like it's really effective as a movie, in like how it is depicting its story and how you like ultimately get to the point where like the clan is showing up as the saviors or whatever. Like I think like an hour and a half into this 3-hour movie, I was sitting around and I was like, yo, when does the clan show up? Like when do they come and like do their thing and like how are they going to show up? It's like the weirdest, grossest like superhero origin story in a lot of ways. Um and I think like it's super easy, and like I will continue to dismiss this movie because of all of the racist bullshit within it, but like as an effective piece of movie making, it like totally works, which I think is one of the most upsetting parts. I sent you an article that you weren't able to read, but the headline is the worst part about Birth of a Nation is how good it is, which I think is like why this movie is still something that we talk about now, because it's so easy to write off as just like a gross racist um piece of media that like we don't need, but it is a really um it's like a masterful wielding of the art form and of cinematic language in a really disturbing way, and I think that that's also important to talk about, and like both of those things can obviously be true at once. um
And
I think a
just
lot
real
of times
quick,
it's really easy to write off things that are as yeah.
I was just gonna say tracing the line. Talking about tracing the lines, I don't think this will get us in any trouble. Um, so recently, I there was an exhibit that opened at the Civil Rights Memorial Center in Montgomery. It's a traveling exhibit about Emmett Till and Mamie Mobley Till, and so I went to go cover it because I'm a journalist. I cover Alabama state politics, and so I was just writing about this exhibit opening, and you know the reasons that Emmett Till are the excuses that were made for why Emmett Till was so brutally beaten and killed are the supposed harassment of a white woman, and that's what the second half of this movie is, and the Klan are like the superheroes protecting these vulnerable white women from these harassing black people, and so you see the lineage of that story um and that excuse for this that allows these people who are doing these horrible acts. I think we can all agree
Mhm.
that the killing of Emmett Till was horrible, and these white men kind of paint themselves as heroic, chivalrous figures that were just enacting some, street justice for someone who was harassing a white woman. So I
I
see
think
that when I watched back Birth of a Nation, I was seeing that same thing play out.
yeah, it's right, like, it's gross and it's disgusting and it's absurdly racist and it's wrong and it's not in line with, like, any of the morals that any of us should wanna have. But I think another interesting thing, kinda to the point that you're saying, is that this is one of the first movies that showed that like movies are important. Like movies are extremely important in terms of like the stories that we tell ourselves about ourselves and who we are. And that tool can be used and utilized to tell us great things about ourselves and to learn some amazing things about the human spirit. And there are, I would say like 95% of the movies in the canon are able to do that and teach us like really positive things about ourselves that we can then go and apply into our lived experiences as we walk the earth in like really great ways. But this movie shows that this tool, that this art form could also be used for the most vile of reasons, and the most vile of like worldviews and causes. Like I don't think that we have any movies from the like Nazi propaganda machine, but in a similar way, like they were using this medium to convince themselves that what they were doing was okay or right or righteous, right? And like as much as we want to say that this art form, this medium is like just for entertainment purposes, it can do so much more. And this movie was like one of the first examples of that. It just sucks that the cause and the thing that it was used for, it was to like reignite this interest in joining the KKK. And like there the numbers of people who like signed up to join the KKK skyrocketed after this movie came out. Like we can't deny that this was a significant movie, not only for what it has meant for the art form going forward, but also what it's meant for like American society.
Yeah, well, this is the like I mean, this is the closest thing in American history we probably have to a feature film that is like state sanctioned propaganda, because this is not a movie that was made by our government, but the
Hmm.
fact that it was like the first movie shown at the White House, and the way that the narrative around this movie at the time was kind of like rubber stamped by the White House, even though Woodrow Wilson also kind of denied some of that and stuff. I mean, the narrative was out there that this movie had like the approval of Woodrow Wilson in the White House. Um, it's probably the closest we've ever gotten. And to your point, I think Triumph of the Will,
I
which
mean,
is
World War II, we were kind of getting like, you know, state sponsored propaganda films
yeah, we
about the
were
war.
getting some of that, and so
But like those are movies where we're like, oh, the propaganda is to beat the Nazis. Like that's good propaganda. This is
true,
just
and
this
those
is
should
just the
be,
worst kind of propaganda.
to the extent that one of those is impactful enough, it should also be in the canon. And honestly, I think Triumph of the Will, Lenny Riefenstahl, I haven't seen it personally. I
Mhm.
think it should be in the canon if we're going to do. I think it is helpful too to know, because I mean, you watch something like that is in the canon, Inglorious Bastards, and they're talking about Triumph of the Will, and if you don't know what's going on, you're like, what is that? And I think it can be helpful to, from a film perspective, I think film lovers should, and this is where I mean, from a Screen Age Wasteland perspective, we don't get into current politics, but there are times where films are specifically political. Obviously, Triumph of the Will is a Nazi sanctioned revisionist kind of documentary that is the same token of this movie, right? It's so wonderfully made that it's effective. It's effective propaganda.
Mhm.
And also, even like I think it's interesting to see the as a film lover, the potential shifts and blurring of lines between like government and political propaganda in film, because I think it wasn't just Triumph of the Will in Nazi Germany. Like the Nazis realized the power of film and kind of took over the whole industry. I mean, we have other movies in the canon from pre-Nazi Germany, like
Mhm.
like it was such a burgeoning place, and then the Nazis came in and kind of twisted it for their own use. So, like, I think things like that could happen in America, and I think if we understand our history of film in that regard, we can kind of better also see if it's happening in real time.
Yeah.
So I think
I think
that's kind of interesting.
it's I mean, it's a hard question. I think generally, I think for me, my kind of idea and approach to it is right. Like, obviously, something like this is it's gross and it's icky and it's not a fun watch. But if we try to erase something like this, like something that was so true and real and something that informed so much of America in the 1910s and going forward, then like we're not going to learn any of the right lessons from it if we just ignore it. Um, right. So if those lessons are, oh, okay, how do we use the techniques of close up and cross cutting and using like a sort of like monochromatic filter on a scene shot in black and white to create effective cinema that can be a tool for good, then if we're not looking at that, then we're kind of losing out. Um, Also, like if we don't know the gross history of our past, then we're doomed to repeat it, right? Like whatever the famous quote is, those who don't know their history are doomed to repeat it. Like I think that's also true of movies, and we
Yeah.
should watch something like Birth of a Nation, as uncomfortable of a watch as it might be.
Well, yeah. I mean, because if you just hear about Birth of a Nation, and you just read the Wikipedia article, you will get that it's very racist and that people generally accepted it at the time, although there was backlash. And you can say, "Wow, that was probably pretty bad, huh?" And then, but if you watch it, you're like, "Oh my god, this is insanely bad." That people were even like that. There were a significant portion of people that were like, "That's right," especially probably in my area in the South was like, that movie gets it. Like that movie tells the story of what happened when those bastards from the North came down here and they tried to let black people run the legislature,
Yeah,
man, and they wouldn't even wear shoes, man. They wouldn't even wear shoes because they're so uncivilized, you know. Um,
but the other thing is that it fills a vacuum, right? Like it can do one of three things. It can either reinforce for someone who has that line of thinking, like, oh yeah, this is the truth as I understand it. Thank you for reflecting that truth. It for folks like us, and I would think for most modern audiences, we see it and we're like, oh my god, that is like so counter to everything that I know to be right and true in the world. Like there were moments where I was watching this and I was laughing at how absurdly, at how like over the top and gross the racism was. Like that scene in the legislator where they just like have white guys in blackface like eating chicken on the floor of the state legislator and like drinking booze and having their shoes off. I was like, I, like that level of racism is like so absurd to me that I can't do anything but like laugh at the stupidity of it. Or if, and I think that this was probably true of a lot of audience members at the time, is that like they didn't really have any thoughts about this because they were removed enough from that history where, yeah, they didn't really like have thoughts about the Reconstruction era or whatever. And this movie like fills that vacuum, and it tells them like, hey, this is the truth of like what you should think. And I think like that's more dangerous than the first one of like just reinforcing someone who already has terribly shitty views.
yeah, absolutely. I real quick just on the fried chicken things because I've always wanted to like point this out. So like obviously the fact that these guys are eating fried chicken like on the floor of the legislature is like a whole extra thing. But it's always been funny to me this racist stereotype of the fried chicken and watermelon because like we all eat that down here. It's like
Yeah,
down here it's like not
there's
racial at all. Like it would be so weird for like a white person in the South to be like, "Oh, there's blackies eating fried chicken and watermelon." It's like we all just eat that down here. So like I that almost feels like more of a northern stereotype
mhm.
that just kind of comes from the South somehow because it's just it's always been so strange to me to be like,
There's the Dave Chappelle joke, where he's like, if you don't like fried chicken and watermelon, something's wrong with you. Like that's like those are totally normal things to like. They're delicious. Like
it's just so bizarre. It's like I mean a white person. I mean that's like just the typical like fried chicken is like the number one cuisine of the South. So it's like it just doesn't
yeah.
even. It's just such a strange. It's a strange looking stereotype to someone here, although
Well,
it may have some more roots.
on the topic of fried chicken, this movie takes place in South Carolina. The best fried chicken I ever had was at this like oyster shack in Charleston, South Carolina. I got to pull up the name of it. I think it's called Leon's. Oh my god, if you're ever in the area, uh Jacob, to you or to anyone who's listening, you got to go to that place.
Are we talking
So good.
about like bone in fried chicken?
Yes. Yeah. Is that the name of the place? Yes. That's it. Leon's Oyster Shop. So good. How do we get back to to the Birth of a Nation? Um yeah, I mean, I think all of these things about this movie like are are true, can be true at once, and it's hard to like hold all of these thoughts and ideas and these conflicting thoughts and ideas about a single piece of text at the same time. Um The another thing that I think is interesting about this movie and like how it plays out, and like what I think is part of its success, or was part of its success, is like how it mixes the historical and the fiction, right? Like obviously we look at it now and we're like, oh my god, this is all super racist. This is like an absurd framing of how everything from like the start of the Civil War through Reconstruction like went down. But then it's mixed in with these moments of like historical accuracy. There's like the burning down of Atlanta, there's the Lincoln assassination, and like moments like that lend credibility to everything else that the movie is doing in a weird way. I don't know if those were things or like moments that stuck out to you while watching.
Yeah, I mean, kind of to a degree. I did watch most of this movie on 2 times speed, so some of it looked a little extra silly. I tried to slow it down for moments that I thought were maybe meaningful, but I didn't slow it
Mhm.
down a whole lot. 'Cause ain't nobody got 3.5 hours for this whole movie. Um, it's like really someone needs to make a cut of this movie that can give you all the good things that you want to understand about it without having to watch the whole thing. Just to give us
Yeah.
a little bit of a reprieve. Um, another one of the things that because the first half is so much less in your face about the racism,
Mhm.
it did early on. It stood out to me that the guy, what the kids from the north and the south were walking through um, the fields, the crop fields. I don't know if they were cotton fields. They were some kind of crops, but they were just walking through in their suits, talking about stuff. And they were talking like there are these big shots, and in the background you have the slaves doing all the work. And I was like, that just in and of itself is such a
Mhm.
a
It's like a
representation
telling
of
image.
here's people in the work in the background doing work in the hot sun, and these other guys are just not even paying attention to them, and they're the ones dressed in suits, and they're just like, that's obviously where their money is coming from. And but for them, the way the movie paints it is like, wow, what a great leisurely life. It's like, well, yeah, yeah, because you see the work in the background is the reason for that.
Yeah.
Uh, Also, this is totally unrelated, and like you get so caught up in this movie talking about race and everything. Um,
Mhm.
I just love the one guy from um, the South. His best friend gives him a picture of his sister, and that becomes like he like holds on to that picture and is just like smitten with his best friend's sister, who he's apparently never seen except for this one picture. And then like he gets injured in the war, and she's a nurse, and she comes around, and he's like, oh my god, you're the girl, you're the sister I've had. And he shows her the picture, and I'm like, so incredibly, it's basically, and I know obviously this is not said, but it's kind of like, I've been holding onto your picture and jacking it to you this whole time during the war. Isn't that romantic? And she's like, oh wow. I'm like, that's so freaking creepy, dude. I'd be like, I don't know you, man. You've been like
Yeah.
staring at my
N
picture at night during the war. Like, no, thank you.
that's definitely pretty messed up. And I don't wanna say it's far down on the list of objectionable things in this movie, but it's far down on the list of, like, noticeably objectionable things in this movie because there are, you know, so many other things that, like, immediately jump off the screen at you. One thing that you were saying that, like, I was thinking about while watching this movie is how the first half isn't as racist as the second half, but the first half does a lot of heavy lifting to rationalize everything that's to come after. Like, Lincoln is, portrayed in this movie as this unethical, mean tyrant kind of figure, and it's like his fault and the North's fault for making everything so bad, and like, you know, it's part of the reason why the KKK must form at the end of the movie. They're like, look at how mean Lincoln and all those northern guys were being to us. Like, one, they freaking like the movie starts and it's like the whole reason that there was ever disunion in this country is because we brought Africans over. And it's like, well, whose fault is that? Like, you're trying to like place blame elsewhere for something that you are fully at fault for doing, which calls into question the entire framing of this movie. But then again, like the movie is so effective in how it tells and portrays the story and like lays out all of the reasoning for the need in the film's eyes for the KKK, like the same way that like we watch an Avengers movie and we're like, well, Loki's gonna burn down New York City. Of course, we need Iron Man and uh, whoever else is in the Avengers, Captain America, and all those guys. Like, of course, we need them because Lincoln's being so mean. And then
We
and then in the second half, they're like, all these all these black guys want to have sex with all the white women. Like, what do you want us to do? Like, we have to do this. It's our
and we
right.
we even get a great superhero suit origin. Uh, you know, where whether it's Toby Maguire having to come up with his own suit for for the cage fight, or it's Iron Man having to build his iron suit out of a box of scraps in a cave because he's been captured by terrorists, or it's this guy watching some white kids cover themselves in a sheet and scare some black kids because they look like a ghost. You know, they're all in the same. They're all in the same tier um, of
Is this the
reasons.
worst superhero origin story of all time? Is that what this movie is?
Basically, oh man, they'll be so scared. They're scared of ghosts. Let's put a big white. Wear
Yeah.
white hoods and look like ghosts, man. Um, although to their credit, they did. I mean, the KKK suits are scary as hell and intimidating.
Yeah. For me, I don't know if it's so much like the white sheets that I find to be scary or if it's their entire worldview. And like
Well,
terrorizing black people and other minority groups that I find to be scary.
yeah,
It could be either one,
but the
but I
but
think
the I think the visage of them matches the worldview, and it's those stupid pointy hats that I mean, I mean, they are creepy. I mean, they would in another world where the KKK didn't exist, this could be an effective like serial killer costume, you know? Like
yeah.
it's kind of terrifying in the same way Michael Myers is terrifying, like the soulless eyes behind, this otherwise it's a humanoid-ish figure, but you can't see into their eyes. That's to me is always a part of like what makes Michael Myers so scary is what makes Jason so scary to the point where I actually think it's stupid every time they take the masks off of those characters. Like anytime Michael Myers takes the mask off, I'm like, oh, that's just a human. Same thing. If you take the mask off of a KKK guy, you're gonna be like, oh, that's just Bob from the mechanic store. Like it's terrifying in the sense that Bob from the mechanic store wants to hunt you down and kill you. Like that's obviously is a
Mhm.
terrifying concept, but the figure loses its like a KKK guy almost looks like he's got some kind of extra power to him. And then you're like, oh, I could probably like shoot Bob, or like stab. I could stab that guy. You know what I mean? You're like that guy's not
Yeah.
that scary.
But,
So
I mean, the interesting thing with this movie versus like uh Halloween or Friday the 13th movie with Michael Myers or Jason is that the KKK is not meant to be scary in this movie. They're the good guys. They're
true,
the heroes of this story,
but
right?
they do fail.
Like,
They do fail. They still do look kind of scary in this movie a little bit. Um,
yeah,
I don't know. It's kind of weird. It's kind of weird, isn't it? Like for people, like they're like here. Look at these great heroes, but their outfit is like legitimately scary. Like
yeah, they're
there's
the
no really good
anti-heroes
way
in this.
to try and turn it around for the white people. To be like, look, doesn't it look heroic? Doesn't this look? But the movie explains it again because it's like we're scaring black people, so it's so it's good.
I think if you're trying to appeal to someone who's like down to join the KKK, I don't know that they are going to have the same sort of aesthetic. I don't want to say principles, but sort of like uh, you know, um, barometer that we would have, right? Like, I think
Well,
anyone who is like down to get behind what the KKK is doing is like going to have um, a less informed, a less advanced aesthetic palette.
well, and honestly, too, this all comes back. This comes back to obviously the KKK in particular is fueled by racism and hatred. But all of these, there's like a section of men, or like, arguably, like it's an undulating percentage of men who really get off on this idea of like being intimidating and being scary, and like
Mhm.
and having some kind of bond with someone, like having a group of men seem inclined to be getting into a group where they can intimidate people, whether that be uh, any kind of gang, modern day gang, whatever, the mafia, a mob. Um, you know, uh, there's a sensibility to that.
An army.
Um, there's a lot of men out there that just want an excuse to have some kind of code that allows them to do violence to other people. Um, it's even in like even in a chivalrous way, even if you go take the group part away from it, there's so many people around here that are like, oh man, I wish somebody would come in my house so I could show them what would happen. I'm like,
Mhm.
what? No, I don't want anyone to come into my house so I have to shoot. I'd rather them just not come into my house, man. But it's like, nah, I want them to come. I wish they would come. I want to shoot
Yeah.
someone and not go to jail. I mean, it's like,
Well, it's this, like, I think a phrase that gets thrown around a lot in, like, our modern times is, like, manufacturing consent for violence, and that's what this movie's doing, right? It's the grossest form of it, where, again, like, the whole framing of the first half is, like, these evil tyrants from the North are just being mean to us, like, that's the only reason that we had to go to war, like, we never wanted to like make the civil war happen. It just these guys were being mean to us and like we had to do it. Like and then during reconstruction we're being imposed upon by again these evil tyrants from the north and these like crazed negroes who they've let loose on us. Like we have to do KKK violence where it, obviously, anyone with like half a brain is like, no, that is like so absurd. The people in this movie who are committing that violence want to commit that kind of violence, right? Like they will use any excuse possible to commit that kind of violence. They were committing that violence before the Civil War started, right? Like it wasn't like they weren't mistreating their slaves or anything, or like the entire system of slavery wasn't a gross, violent exploitation of people. Like
Raph,
this was
now,
already
now, Raph, you got
happening.
that wrong. That No, they most slave owners treated their slaves like family. Um,
Oh,
most
okay.
slaves wanted to just, even when they were freed, they were like, they took their slave owners' last names. Man, they just wanted to be hanging around. That's what they wanted to do. They wanted to do the work and just chill with this white family, because that's like their family, man. Don't you know?
Yeah.
Um, that still persists very much to this day. This is like local politics, so
Mhm.
I'm just gonna. If Duke, I don't think Duke will care. Um, like, even so, in Prattville, I live in Prattville,
Hey,
which
Duke.
is hey Duke. I live in Prattville, which is a suburb of Montgomery. Which Prattville is named after Daniel Pratt, who is the not the creator of the cotton gin, but like became the predominant manufacturer of cotton gins in the South, and arguably um, uh, revived slavery in the same sense that this film revived the KKK, because um, the cotton gin, for people who don't understand what that means, a cotton gin is a piece of equipment that allows cotton to be processed much more quickly, which means that you then now have a reason to gather much more cotton much more quickly. So that increase led to increase of slavery, and Daniel Pratt was a major slave owner, despite the fact that he didn't have a plantation. He used slaves in the factory, plus he had some of his own slaves for his estate. Um, and just recently, the city of Prattville decided to name a new like music venue, after Esther Pratt, and the black community was upset because Esther Pratt, obviously, along with Daniel Pratt, was a slave owner. But the people here in Prattville have a very hard time. Um, they don't want to cast Daniel Pratt as a bad man, because in his mind, he established the school and the library and the church and the town, and he is the guy that made this whole town what it is. So because like the whole town was
Mhm.
based around his business, um, and so they're like, we should still honor that because he's a good guy. But it's like we are still falling in these traps today of like um, downplaying slavery and downplaying those. And of course, this is moving more about the KKK than about slavery, but we're still
Mhm.
downplaying those things today. Like if you ask anyone in Prattville, is slavery bad? They'll say, of course, yeah. But like when it comes time to honor someone, it's like, well, was it that bad? Otherwise he was like a paragon of virtue,
Those were the times.
and like specifically with Daniel Pratt, and this is a bit of a tangent, but I've done this research, so I like to share it. Um, Daniel Pratt was from New Hampshire, and he came. His
Mhm.
father was a pastor, and he actually wrote a letter before he established his like empire. He was living in like Georgia or like nearby in Wetumpka, Alabama, in like a little log cabin. And his dad apparently found out that he had four slaves. And Daniel Pratt was like, I didn't want to tell you about this because I know you probably think I'm damned to hell for eternity. But he's like, but I only have four, and I probably won't have them that long. And everyone here has them. You don't understand the culture here. And if they weren't in my possession, they would be probably in like the hands of someone worse. And I didn't cause them to come into slavery. So, all things together, it's kind of okay. And he ended up having like 107 slaves before around the time of the start of the Civil War. So he actually had a lot more, and he
Mhm.
actually kept them for longer than he said. And he actually, and to be fair, he did try to put white workers in the industry, but when that failed, he switched back and relied on slave labor. He used slaves as collateral to get some of the land. I mean, we have a very iconic, the Prattville's iconic thing is our little creek that used to be a swamp. It was dug by slaves. So like Prattville is entrenched in slavery. But we just give Daniel Pratt a pass on that because even if we say slavery is bad, we just give people a pass. Even though if he had been like trafficking little white girls or something, he would be off the table for honoring. And so we're down south especially, we have, and this is where things like the birth of a nation come into play, is we get told these stories again and again that we use to
Mhm.
insulate ourselves from the realities of what was going on. And that's what this
Yeah.
kind of does. I mean, it reinforces people's mentality of that's what happened, not the way that they say whatever they say up north.
That's the story of America, right? Is this like constant grappling with the version of our history, our shared history, our current times, and all that stuff that we want to tell ourselves. And it ranges from everything from slavery, the original sin of this country, and like the genocide of Native Americans who lived here, up to what it is that we tell ourselves about like what the future of AI means, right? Like, and everything in between, from like World War II to the Civil War to the Cold War. It's interesting that a lot of these are wars that inform how it is that we think about ourselves. But like this is a struggle that we as a nation have had. It's not exclusive to us. Like other nations have the similar questions that they grapple with. But to bring it back to this movie, like movies end up informing a lot of that stuff, and like how it is that we think about ourselves, and which truths about ourselves we want to acknowledge, which ones we want to ignore, which ones we want to face head on. And like we're two guys who like watching movies. Like we're obviously not going to have answers to all of these questions, but like they are things that are worth exploring and trying to understand, because it is important. Like this art form, it does end up meaning a lot more than like, oh, I really like Pulp Fiction because it looks cool or whatever. Like there there is so much that this art form tells us about ourselves, and like we have to openly and thoughtfully acknowledge all of that, including the darkest moments of it, which I don't know that there is a darker movie in the canon than The Birth of a Nation. Um, but I think for me, right, as like a Black American film fan, this is something I have to watch, and all of my thoughts about like what it means uh, are there and are present, and will like maybe change over time and have changed over time. Like before I knew about this movie, after I knew about this movie, after I watched this movie, after I've thought about it, after I've talked about it with different people. But these are like all worthwhile things, in my opinion. That you know, again, I think it just speaks to the power of the art form, for better or for worse. And we can't just like think that it's all going to be for better.
For sure. Well, that kind of feels like a button on the main discussion to me.
Yeah, I think so. I think we can probably start diving into recommendations. Yeah, I think we touched on everything, right? Like I think the last thing that I would say about this movie, like my big takeaway from it, which I think speaks to everything that we've sort of talked about, is that like for me this is like the perfect poster child movie for the era of modernity, where right, like we have all these insane industrial and technological advances that are being made, including advances in the arts like cinema. Like this was an insane new artistic technology that we had, moving images, that's wild, that we had at the turn of the century. um and like a lot of the other ills of modernity, which like end in the two world wars and the Holocaust, is that these tools, these like magnificent tools that we as humans created, were used for the worst possible thing imaginable. And like that is what created the postmodern world of post World War II that we are like maybe still living in today, or like maybe ended a couple decades ago. But like this movie's the perfect poster child for that. Like we have this amazing new art form. We have motion pictures. This is one of the first feature length films. This movie was 12 reels of film strip long, when most movies of the time were about 5 or 6. Like, this is an insane achievement of what we can do with this technology. And it was used for the worst thing imaginable. And if that's not modernity and the story of like the modern world as we understand the late 19th century and early 20th century, then I don't know what is. So I think for that,
And just to and now just to throw an extra pile of shit on this movie just because um the score is so like dated and out, like it does nothing for me to do with the story. Like there's dramatic stuff happening on the screen, the score is like you're like, I can't emotion, it's hard for me to emotionally get into any of the stuff happening because that score is just so distracting to me. But those are good
another word,
times, you know. That's just kind of like most silent films do that to me.
another worthwhile, we'll say, criticism of this movie. But yeah, Jacob, I mean, this has probably been the weirdest episode of the canon that we've had to do. So thanks again for joining. Uh, Again, these are like insanely difficult topics to tackle and discuss, but I think we did as all right of a job as we're gonna do.
I
So
think yeah, I think it came out pretty good, and I think it's, most of the movies in the canon also are like kick ass and fun to watch. So this is a rarity for us.
yeah. Well, with that, I think we can jump into some recommendations, and I think we'll end up spending a little bit more time on these than we typically do in recommendations, just based on the conversation that we had and what I haven't seen your recommendations, you haven't seen my recommendations, but I'm interested to see what it is that we end up pulling for this movie. So, with all that said, we've got our three. We each have, yeah, things to check out for folks who have watched Birth of a Nation. We both have at least one movie and two other things, maybe more movies or books or music or whatever the hell else. So, whenever you're ready, give us your
Yeah,
first one.
I might even have a bonus. I might even have 4 recommendations, and we're just whatever. Who cares?
Yeah, we might
Um,
have to do 4. We might have to do 5, honestly.
um, my first recommendation is going to be the easiest one because we're supposed to always do a movie.
Mhm.
And you're like, what do you recommend off the back of The Birth of a Nation? And it's so easy for me to just go with my favorite Spike Lee movie, Black Klansman. Um, we want to look into the actual way that the Klan acted, which is extremely pathetic and still like intimidating. There's nothing better than watching the real story of Ron Stallworth, the black detective who goes undercover in the KKK. Um, of course, he over the phone. That's John David Washington and Zell's son, and then Adam Driver plays the part of Ron Stallworth for any in public meetings that they need. I think it's interesting that Adam Driver is a passing Jew, and the way that the movie adds that into the story arc of race and identity and like how you feel about the racial politics at that time. But more than anything, man, Black Klansman is just a great time. It's thrilling. It's hilarious. Lots of dark comedy in it. When Ron Stallworth calls David Duke on the phone at the end, it's funny. I think it balances really well too. Like it doesn't make it out that the police as a whole are just like superheroes that are just like
Mhm.
anti-racist, like the whole department. I mean, Ron Stallworth and his couple of guys are basically the only ones that are really like pushing this thing, and they sometimes are having to push back and also sometimes losing to their own department heads, who are more interested in um, surveilling Stokely Carmichael, the civil rights activist, than they are in the KKK guys. But everything comes through. There's a thrilling ending. There's lots of great dialogue and conversations about race and policing and the KKK, and ultimately the KKK is just so pathetic and so the members are so stupid and scary because again, anytime you have a stupid person with a gun is a scary thing. um,
Yeah.
an easily agitated person with a gun is a scary thing. So and obviously the immense risk that Ron Stallworth takes, being a black person messing around with the KKK is there. So yeah, that's probably my favorite film that I've seen that deals with the Klan. There's a few other ones out there that I need to get to, but that's the one that I would select.
Yeah. That's a great first pick. It, in a lot of ways, feels like a direct response to The Birth of a Nation. It's probably like the most digestible and accessible of Spike's more recent movies. So it's a perfect pick. I love it. Okay, I think because of that, I'll go with I have a Spike Lee movie too. Uh this movie, Birth of a Nation, obviously features a lot of really troubling uh white actors in blackface doing, minstrelly performances and interpretations of black characters. And one of my favorite Spike Lee movies, probably not my favorite, but I think it's an extremely effective, funny, thoughtful, very challenging movie to watch, about modern day minstrel shows and really like highlighting the absurdity of that whole idea, both in its like historical context and in the contemporary context. But I'm gonna recommend Bamboozled. I don't know if I've recommended it before, but I highly, highly, highly recommend that anyone who has not seen that movie checks it out. Again, it's like kind of a challenging watch. I don't know how it reads as a white audience member, but I just think that that is like one of the most fantastic things that Spike has ever done and has not gotten as many eyes on it as possible because of the nature of like what it's about. Um, but it also does a lot of really interesting stuff with like this is in like the early 2000s when people are starting to play around with digital photography, and it does like really interesting things with that notion and like switching back and forth between digital and film photography, and like is saying a lot of things about um minstrel shows and like performing blackness in that regard. Like, yeah, if you want a movie that is like tackling that issue head on, Bamboozled is the way to go.
Nice. I know you talked about it when we were talking at some point about American Fiction, because apparently, American Fiction has similarities, but Bamboozled is a lot more um, out there, a lot more.
It's a lot more biting. Yeah.
Yeah,
American Fiction is a very, very tame look at like a similar issue that Bamboozled is looking at. Um, and like, I get people like American Fiction, not my favorite movie. I think if you want something that's like tackling a little bit more head on, uh, look at Bamboozled.
yeah. So I'm excited, and I'll let you know from my wide perspective what that looks like
Yeah.
watching it. So that'll be fun. Um, So my second recommendation, at first when I was like trying to make recommendations for this movie, it's like, what do you even do? Because because of the content matter and all that. Like obviously the easiest recommendation it feels like would be to do the 2016 movie, The Birth of a Nation.
Hmm.
But I have not seen that movie at this point. But I do remember watching the trailer when that came out, and surprising enough, or maybe not surprising, I don't know when it would be surprising for a white person to hear this song. So 2016, I would have been 24, in a very conservative household. Before that, until I was 18.
Hmm.
So anyway, that trailer was the first time I'd ever heard the song Strange Fruit.
Hmm.
Um, and specifically, this is the Nina Simone version. So um, I'm recommending the song Strange Fruit by Nina Simone. Or if you want to listen to the Billie Holiday version, which is the original, you can do that. But the Nina Simone version, I mean, it just floored me when I heard the trailer. I was like, "What is this song?" And so I had to look it up and, listen to the whole lyrics. It's a very haunting song about lynchings. Um, and to me, Nina Simone's version of it is just like it expands upon the original song and really hits the tone of what the lyrics are, and takes the melody to its like most haunting place, and becomes such a song that gets down in your bones about the
Yeah.
horror of it in a way that very few things can. I mean, even pictures almost like, um, it's like what can shake you to the most about lynchings, and that song is just one to me that just really makes you feel it.
Yeah.
I'm
That's a
assuming, have
great
you
pick.
have you heard "Train Fruit" by Nina Simone or
I
Billie
f-
Holiday?
I feel like I have, but like I don't know it. I need to actually sit with it and listen to it like intentionally, you know?
Yeah,
Like it's I feel like it's a song that I've like heard in throughout my life, but not one that I know, if that makes sense.
yeah, no, definitely give it a listen.
Okay, I'm gonna kind of stay, I think, on theme with what you're doing for your second recommendation. Um, I also have not seen the 2016 version of Birth of a Nation. I feel like it got kind of mixed reviews. I feel like if it were something that were more powerful, I probably would have heard more about it and have seen it. Which, at least someone tried. I don't know who the filmmaker is or like who the creative team was behind it or who's in it, but um, glad you tried. But came out in 2016, which is about 100 years after this movie came out, which is wild that this movie's over 100 years old. But in 2015, exactly 100 years after this movie came out, um, there was an album released that I don't know was necessarily a direct response, but can definitely be read as a response to a text like Birth of a Nation. In many ways, it's widely considered a masterpiece. I think like everyone has listened to it. Um, Not necessarily about like lynching directly, but about sort of the history of Black Americans in this country, and understanding that history and how it shapes who we are today, and kind of looking forward at what can be done, I'm going to recommend Kendrick Lamar's "To Pimp a Butterfly" because it's a banger of an album.
Very nice. I think I've tried to listen to a song or two off that album. I've never sat down and like listened to the
Yeah,
album. So
it's not really a song or two album. It's like one of those you have to like
front to
you
back.
can't like listen to it while like cleaning the house or something. That's a movie that's a or an album where you have to just like sit down and just listen to it. Like you're not doing anything else. You are fully locked in and listening to it, and then you have to read a million think pieces about it, explaining all of the different like songs and historical figures and like musical and artistic movements that he's referencing from like bar to bar, song to song, and then like going back to like three songs later, and it's like it's one of the most insane pieces of art ever put together. And again, like when you think about something like Birth of a Nation, framing American history to tell a very particular story about who we are, I think To Pimp a Butterfly is doing the same thing, but from the other end of that perspective in a way that's probably more uh, beneficial to us as a country and society as we continue to move forward and grow.
Well, that sounds like a. I mean, obviously, I've heard a lot of people praise "To Pimp a Butterfly," so I'm excited to take that journey. Um, my last recommendation, or my what would usually be my last recommendation, anyway. Um, so I don't know. I guess D.W. Griffith. It doesn't sound like he himself was a Klansman, even though he made this piece of KKK propaganda based on a play called The Klansman. So I was thinking, well, what about recommending a movie that was made by a Klansman? So I'm recommending Josh Trank's Fantastic Four. Um,
Don't do
fun,
that to Josh Trank.
fun fact:
He's a bad film.
Josh Trank actually cast Michael B. Jordan as the Human Torch because he's like, how fun would it be to see a black guy set himself on fire as a
Oh
superpower?
my.
Um, this
Oh
is a
man.
this is this is a bit. This is absurd. Josh Trank, no known connections to the Klan. Um, sorry,
He's
Josh
a
Trank.
bad filmmaker, but we can't accuse him of being a Klansman.
That was that the Human Torch bit was just to take it further into obvious parody. Um, okay, so
That's the
we
most wild joke anyone has ever told on this show. In the like 100 plus episodes, that's the most insane joke I've heard. So kudos.
that's what I'm here for. I'm here for the insane jokes. Very dark comedy. Sorry, I mean everything's cool though. Josh Trank, you're fine. Look forward to what you do next. Um, Really, I have a book to recommend, and it's a book that I can't talk about as from someone who's perspective of someone who's read it. It's actually on
Mhm.
my list as well. So, but I'm recommending it because I think it's going to be really interesting. And that is, let me actually, I need to pull up the name of it. I don't have it in front of me. I think it's called Unmasking the Klansman.
Hmm.
Um, let me get the. So yeah, it's called Unmasking the Klansman: The Double Life of Asa and Forrest Carter. So Asa Earl Carter was a Klansman that wrote the George Wallace "Yesterday, Today, Forever" speech. Um, and then he went into basically hiding. He assumed the name Forrest Carter, and he actually wrote. So as Forrest Carter, he claimed to be um, like Native American or have Native American ancestry, and he actually wrote
Mhm.
a pretty famous book called "The Education of Little Tree," which is a children's book that's like a memoir style novel about him growing up with Cherokee grandparents in the Appalachian Mountains. Apparently, complete bullshit. Um,
Hmm.
just like a completely fictional autobiography. And people like loved it. It was like a classic for a little while before it was revealed that this guy was actually a member of the KKK and all this stuff. He also wrote the book. He also wrote a book called The Rebel Outlaw Josie Wells, which
Mm,
is what was adapted into The Outlaw Josie Wells by Clint Eastwood. So this is an interesting dude. He's a writer and he's a KKK member, but the book is like diving into his story and how this dude who was this awful racist KKK guy wrote literally one of the most famous racist speeches from one of our politicians ever.
mhm,
Was able to shift and assume this fake identity, and for years, no one even knew that they were the same person, and like created this whole new narrative for himself, which I really felt like goes in with this Birth of a Nation, where this new narrative is being created for the Klan. He's creating a new narrative for himself away from the Klan. I feel like bringing people's attention to that book, um, is worthwhile because it just seems so fascinating to me, um, that someone who's so racist could go on and
mhm.
then claim like Native American ancestry and write this beloved book of supposedly his Native American upbringing when he's literally a white supremacist. Um, quite an interesting story.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I might have to read it. Yeah, dude sounds like a total piece of shit. uh, but like Birth of a Nation, you know, sometimes total pieces of racist shit or racist total pieces of shit end up being effective in whatever medium they choose to pursue, whether it be filmmaking or writing. Um, and it's unfortunate. And yeah, the best thing that we can do is right, like the First Amendment is meant to you combat bad speech with good speech. So we just have to keep making good art and writing good things that counter uh, this shit art and these shit things, which I think all of our recommendations are doing. So for my third, I'm also going to recommend a book, slightly different vibe, but I'm going to recommend a book from one of my favorite writers. It's a collection of essays about movies, including I don't know that it's a full essay about this movie, but this movie does come up for obvious reasons. But I'm recommending James Baldwin's The Devil Finds Work, which it's him just kind of thinking through movies that he's seen and how he relates to them and how it relates to the experience of being a black person in America. And obviously, like someone writing from that perspective is not going to ignore the birth of a nation. So again, I think the theme is obvious if you are looking for pieces of art that can like counterbalance this piece of shit racist movie. Read something like The Devil Finds Work to help understand like what it is that this movie is doing and why it's detrimental to all of us. Uh, but yeah,
That's
that's
awesome.
my
Yeah, I
third.
haven't. I'm sure I've read some of James Baldwin, but it's been a long time ago in like a literature class. So I really need to read that and honestly a lot more of James Baldwin stuff. This is interesting. This was like the most academic, um, like level of recommendations we've had on the canon just because of what we're dealing with. Um, but in that, I'm just going to keep the recommendations rolling, and I'm going to pull way back from the academic because
Give me
my
one more.
recommendation is to, most people have probably already seen this, but go check out a YouTube clip of the Montgomery Riverfront Brawl. Um, because and I thought of this because of the scene in this movie, where there was the one white guy in the bar and he's, punching and like destroying this whole bar full of, black folks, and by black folks I mean people in blackface. And
Mhm.
he's just like it's at least 10 black guys, and this white guy is just like superheroing his way out of the bar and like punching them all out. So if you want a more realistic image of how that would go, just check out the Montgomery Riverfront Brawl, in which two really, uh, annoying, pathetic a group of drunk white guys, try and mess around with the cruise boat and get absolutely curb stomped um, out of there. And it's
Yeah.
also very great to have. It's like the one thing of Montgomery violence that we can like hold on to because it doesn't involve guns. We can just enjoy good old fashioned fisticuffs plus a one steel chair.
Yeah. That's yeah, if you want to watch a video of kind of in line with Black Klansman, if you want to watch something where racist assholes get a bit of a comeuppance, that's a good video to watch. We yeah, it's we'll throw in a bonus recommendation of actually I won't throw it in. But yeah, this movie, you watch this movie and you're like, gosh, I wish that all of these assholes involved will one day
I
get their comeuppance.
I do
Um,
have one more recommend. I didn't really think of this as a recommendation. I actually should have brought this up during the main portion of the episode, but I kind of forgot.
mhm.
But it technically counts as a recommendation too. I want everyone to go back and watch The Birth of a Nation again. But I want every time that there's a white man with blackface on screen, instead of treating that as an actor, a white actor in blackface representing a black actor, a character, I want you to take it as the character is supposed to be a white man in blackface. So like
Mm.
when the white man in blackface is chasing after the girl and forces her to jump off the cliff and all of that stuff, that's not a black man. That's a white man in blackface just running around after this girl trying to pretend that
Yeah.
he's a black. So like change the whole narrative of the movie by every time there's a guy in blackface, it's just white people trying to make up because this is what this movie is. It's like white
Mhm.
people trying to make up problems. So just treat it meta in the movie and be like, yeah, the scourge is not actually a black person; it's a white guy in blackface who's like, I can get away with this if I put on some
Or
blackface.
just it's a white guy, right? Like the it's telling. It's very telling of the people involved. More so than it's telling of like the nature of any black person who's ever existed. Um and then I mean, yeah, we didn't talk about it during during the actual conversation, but like there's scenes where uh like the black characters who are now in this town in South Carolina are like intimidating voters and committing violence against people when they like attempt to vote or are just like living their lives. And again, that's very telling, right? Like we all know that it's the opposite that's true, and to some extent is still true, where um the people who are telling us that like the problem is one way are actually the ones who are committing said things that they are accusing this other group of in this piece of media, which you know it's it's important. Media is important, movies are important, they tell us a lot about ourselves. And oftentimes um if you are creating something that is gross and cynical and you're trying to tell us something about another group of people, you're really just revealing more about how gross and stupid and ugly you are. And that's what this movie is doing for racist Klansmen. So if God forbid there's anyone in 2026 who watched this movie and thinks like, hell yeah, that's rad. Um,
Oh, I
I
know
got
some
news for you,
folks.
buddy.
Part of my job is I cover the Southern Cultural Center, which is a neo-Confederate group just about 30 miles away from me. And man, they just posted the other day, like, come by, we're gonna have a piece of history from sweeter times, and it was a sign for the campaign of George Wallace. Um,
Is it fucked up for me to say if those people are going to be watching gross racist movies, at least they watch something like this that has like, some cinematic intrigue as opposed to just watching like gross racist stuff that is like poorly lit and
sure,
poorly shot.
true. Although they'll probably take whatever they'll probably take gross racist shit in whatever form they will is given to
Yeah.
them. Mostly
They're
really bad AI slop memes.
yeah, they're not so much concerned with the artistic integrity that's presented. Uh
It
well,
will be lost on
Jacob,
them.
Yeah, we did it, man. We made it through. Um, Hopefully next week there will be a much brighter and easier movie to celebrate as something that's essential. But thank you for joining for this and for helping us through. Um, folks can check out Jacob Holmes on Movies in Black and White, as well as on the Wasteland. This guy's everywhere. He's doing Saw exclusive interviews. He's doing weekend wrap. He's doing pole position. He's got reviews up on the website. So check out all Jacob's work. Jacob, can folks find you on like Letterbox if they want? If they
Uh,
read and watch you on the Screen Age Wasteland page and they're like, I need more of this guy, where can they follow along?
yeah. Let's see. My letterbox. I want to make sure I have the right username here. Yeah, Crimson Film 62. Crimson
Cool.
Film 62. That is it. So yeah, you can find me there. All my great takes on movies.
Awesome. I'm sure we'll see you back here at some point throughout the rest of the season of the canon. And yeah, like I said, we'll be back next week with another essential movie, wherever it is that you're catching us now, whatever feed, Spotify, Apple, Google, Amazon, or on the ever so lovely Screen Age Wasteland YouTube page, where you can find, again, pole position and weekend wrap and all that other good stuff. Screenagers, we will see you here next week for another one. And as always, in the meantime, we'll see all of you lovely folks in the wasteland.